When you think of Afghanistan, what do you think of? Do you know anything about Afghanistan? About its history? About its people? Do you know anything at all about Afghanistan? Into the early 1970s, Afghanistan was on par in terms of development as other modernizing Central Asian countries. The capital city, Kabul, itself was a destination location for tens of thousands of Western travelers, very popular with those who identified themselves from within the hippie counterculture. But in 1973, things would begin to change. After ruling since 1933, King Mohammad Zahir Shah was deposed. That started a period of volatility that eventually led to a Soviet invasion in 1979. Over the ensuing decade, more than 1 million Afghans would die as their country was systematically bombed into rubble. While the Soviets were able to destroy the physical structure of the country, the anti-Soviet Mujahideen only got stronger. And after 10 years of fighting, the Soviets completed a withdrawal in 1989. With the departure of the Soviets, the Afghan government collapsed, creating a void that would be filled by dozens of Mujahideen leaders who had built their own private armies. Each army with its own idea of what was right and what was wrong. That led to even more fighting, which continued to pound the country back into time. Then in 1996, the Taliban, led by radical Muslim fundamentalists, gained control of most of the country. The following 4 years became an era of relative stability in Afghanistan, but one of terror or death for most women and anyone who opposed the Taliban's strict interpretation of Islamic Sharia or holy law. The Taliban's hatred of the West quickly aligned them with an up-and-coming terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda, the brainchild of Saudi millionaire dissident Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda shares similar views to those of the Taliban and therefore were welcome to use Afghanistan as the center of their training efforts. Training camps sprung up throughout the country, and Afghanistan began turning out thousands of jihadis who would one day soon be used in a prolonged war across much of the world. This camp is called Tarnak Farms. It was Osama bin Laden's third largest and reportedly his favorite training camp, earning it a second name, the base, which in Arabic means Al-Qaeda. Up until October 2001, this sprawling complex located 18 kilometers from Kandahar alone turned out thousands of recruits. In 1998, Tarnak Farms earned international headlines when then U.S. President Bill Clinton ordered cruise missile attacks in response to Al-Qaeda's growing threat. Over the next 2 years, as the threat from bin Laden grew clearer, Tarnak Farms was slated to be raided by U.S. Special Operations Forces in an attempt to kill or capture the renegade Saudi millionaire. At least 4 plans were aborted, primarily over concerns of civilian casualties and the low probability that the mission would be successful. Within 2 years, a group of terrorists, many of whom trained here, hijacked 4 airliners and used them as weapons against the United States. A month later, on October 7th, an American-led coalition invaded Afghanistan. One of its first targets was Tarnak Farms, the place many believe the attacks of 9/11 were born. By the beginning of 2004, the war in Afghanistan had long been relegated to a small spattering of stories that would occasionally make the news. The Americans had just 18,000 troops in Afghanistan, mostly securing areas in the east and the south of the country. The International Security Assistance Force, also known as ISAF, combined for an additional 9,000 troops that worked to secure the capital Kabul and relatively quiet areas in some northern parts of the country. By far, though, ISAF's largest concentration of force was in the capital city of Kabul. Several countries, including the Canadians, which you see here, split the city of nearly 3 million people into enforcement zones where they vigorously patrolled in support of the local police. It's from this strong central base in Kabul that ISAF expanded west in August of 2005, and again into the volatile southern and central parts of Afghanistan, beginning in the late part of the year. But in 2004, of the combined 27,000 international troops, less than 1/6 were actual combat troops, leaving large areas of the country in the north, west, and south void of any sustained covert foreign or government forces. With security left up to the discretion of ever-tense militias, hundreds of illegal checkpoints could be found all across the country, extorting money and food from those who dared to pass through. For the most part, the world was focused on the growing conflict in Iraq, not just by the means of the media, but also in international foreign policy. Regardless, both at Kandahar Airfield in the south and here at the main U.S. base at Bagram Airfield just north of Kabul, things were taking on all the signs of a long-term commitment. Most everything within this theater of operation originates from Bagram Airfield, also the main Soviet base during the 1980s. All U.S. troops enter and exit Afghanistan from this airfield. But as the country stabilized and the progress could be measured, the gradually building success was going completely unnoticed. The short attention span of a world fed by 24-hour rerun news was losing track of one of the greatest experiments in democracy of all time. That would all change with the new year as the United States announced Operation Mountain Storm. Operation Mountain Storm, 3 words that would once again renew interest in Afghanistan and attract the world's media back to this conflict that was already being dubbed as forgotten, as rumors spread Osama bin Laden was about to be captured. The newfound interest in the war gave the Americans an opportunity to launch a fresh PR campaign as the reconstruction phase of the war began. It was a strategy dubbed Hearts and Minds, and it was a phrase used before by the American military. The idea was to take advantage of the relative stability of the country and work toward the hearts of the people, ultimately winning the minds of a very war-weary and suspicious populace.
We help drill wells, we help start schools, we help refurbish clinics, that sort of thing. Whatever the needs of the village, either I try to do it with funds we have available, or I try to find somebody who can do that for them.
The first objective is security. Here, members of a brand new Afghan National Army are working side by side with U.S. Special Operations Forces as the Americans begin spreading out in small groups to assess the needs of the villages within their area of operation. The Afghan army is important to this process for several reasons. The most important is to help the Americans build credibility. They're hoping to do this by putting an Afghan face on the coalition's efforts.
Starting, but I can't build them a new building, and I can't provide a teacher with the money that I have. There are other people who can.
The Americans are also eager to show off the new army, but a new army here is a new concept to most of these people. The idea of a unified national army representing one central government in Afghanistan is unheard of here. Without simple things like roads, telephones, and wells, most can't grasp the need for a government hundreds of miles away. And it's for that reason the presence of Afghan troops is so important to the Americans. At the same time, the Americans are doing village assessments to find out what the villagers need most. Wells and schools are high on the list of most villages' needs, but so are mosques, which the Americans say they cannot build. Not everyone always agrees, but in the end, the Americans leave with an idea of what they will help each village with.
That's typical when you get several elders together and they have differing opinions, but mainly their largest concern is water. They don't have enough drinking water. What they have is salty, it's poor quality, and that's because the water table has been steadily dropping for 7 years of drought. They also are interested in having a school here in the village, but I'm not authorized to do new construction on schools. I can only do refurbishment, so I'll have to pass that project off to someone else.
They also leave blankets and hand-cranked radios.
Appreciate his time and his answers to his questions.
Two items that most of us take for granted are hot items here in rural Afghanistan. With the majority of Afghanistan's population living in these conditions, it's easy to understand why the formidable task that lies ahead will take years to accomplish. This village, assessed months ago, is now getting a follow-up call.
What is on this?
We have one that's to support the ANA and also the ANA recruitment. We have one for that gives Pashto in English to help them learn a little bit. There's a mine awareness. We also have support your government and make sure they voter registration. And then also the ones we give out to the kids are the ones that have the Afghan and the American flag and like a dove and the peace thing. So just.
And what's the purpose of handing out that type of stuff?
Well, we do information dissemination. We give it out to the village elders, as well as giving it out to select people and select adults. So that way, we get a better distribution. So we know that it's all getting out. So, but a lot of it's just information and putting things out, and also things that we want to be concerned about, such as mine awareness is a big thing.
The Americans want to make sure the work they contracted to local Afghans has actually gotten done.
2 hand pumps, only the good water quality. The hand pump, the top one, the diesel.
In this village, the Americans are looking for 2 wells, which have been put in properly. The hope is that they'll provide water for these villages for years to come.
people
As the
have-
progress in this village is monitored, the education about a new government and elections continues. The war for the population's hearts and minds is in full swing, heading into a pre-election summer that all analysts predicted would be a bloody one.
The government of Afghanistan is working on a plan to move irrigation water here.
But a warm war story is an oxymoron, and it didn't take long for the press to figure